When I think of Danish humor,
That humor is a big part of society.
It can be a bit sarcastic, or people can be very direct.
I guess to me, Danish humor is a little bit dark, a little bit dry, maybe a little bit sarcastic, maybe a little bit harsh sometimes.
It's a folklore that Danish humor is a lot different from other kinds of humor. But maybe the places where you use the humor is different.
Danish humor is maybe testing the limits, maybe trying to see where the limit is. Maybe a bit provocative sometimes, but also fun.
Danish humor is kind of just regular humor. Like it's not really unique to Danes or to Denmark. It's more in the way that it gets used, or maybe even used against you in Denmark, that makes it different.
I like that the Danes, they don't take themselves too seriously at all. They're also a little bit dark, which is really nice. But I do also like that their humor often has soul to it. Like it is still wholesome, and it still has to have a good a good essence to it.
I find Danish humor has a lot of wordplay. I guess English does, and probably every language has a lot of wordplay at its core. And that can be a challenge, obviously. I mean, there's a lot of times that maybe I doubt myself when I try to be funny, because I have to reflect on, would this turn of phrase make sense to somebody? Or is it a reference that only an American who grew up in the 90s in the US would kind of get?
Either there's references that you can translate, or maybe there's just like words that are very funny in one language, but then when you translate it, maybe that word is like 4 words and doesn't have any punch and any or maybe the word doesn't even exist.
But the fun of the wordplay goes the other way as well, because as a foreigner, I can find humor in parts of Danish that a native speaker probably wouldn't find funny, like understanding that like a raccoon is a washing bear or a butterfly is a summer bird. Like, to me, that's ridiculous and really funny. To a Dane, that's probably just a raccoon and butterfly.
I love performing in languages that is not my maternal language, because you sort of get a set of limitations you have to work within. But it's also very fun to work within those limitations. And also, when you don't speak the language as a native speaker, you can also see stuff with the language that they don't see, which can be quite fun. So if you're a foreigner living in Denmark, don't be afraid to try to be funny, because even though you're not funny in the way that your Danish friends are funny, you're funny in your own way.
I think my comedy style really resonates with the Danes because bilinguality is such a given thing here. So the Danes are very good at being able to speak English and then sort of look at themselves in a weird mirror where they can see Danish through English, and you can have all of this fun going backwards and forwards.
Language can be a challenge, and that's not the only thing that doesn't translate, because sometimes sarcasm, which is a big part of Danish humor, doesn't always translate across different cultures.
I haven't experienced that Danish humor has been a culture clash for me personally, but I think in general it might be a culture clash because it can be a bit sarcastic, or people can be very direct in a manner that is not as accustomed for people living outside of Denmark or outside of Scandinavia.
Like my friend, he works in Germany and a lot, and they don't joke around in the workspace. They there's a lot of like miscommunication if you just start roasting somebody early in the morning with suited up people, and but I think when the Germans go to a comedy show, they know that now it's comedy. Now it's comedy time. Now we can have fun. And so then it's no problem. That's my theory.
I think that the idea of like, I know that you know that I'm joking only works in like a smaller insular country like Denmark. So when you start to add people that maybe from other cultures, you start to lose some people, and those outsiders feel even more outside when that happens.
But you can be as ridiculous and mean as you want, as long as it's all within this kind of like self-irony. And I do find that with my own comedy that I have to very quickly point at my own flaws, my red hair, being from Britain. Britain also has terrible weather before I can start pointing at the Danes.
Sarcasm and especially self-deprecation are cores to Danish humor, and it's obviously not unique to Danish humor at all, but it's kind of interesting how it plays out in the real world. I think especially I find that humor in this way can be disarming. I find a lot more humor, not in like a ha-ha way, but in a way of kind of having an in-group or disarming each other in a group at work than I've ever found anywhere else. And also you find it's easy to make fun of janteloven, whether it's real or not, but there certainly are social norms in Danish society, and humor is an easy way to kind of keep control of that, where if somebody sees that they're getting a little too big for their britches, as we'd say, or maybe standing out a little bit, that's a way to knock them down a peg and bring everybody back to the same level.
There is, of course, a Stoicism to Danish society where, people don't complain too much and they are very focused on what they're doing, and it's about, what is my duty and responsibilities and these kind of things. But they also use humor to kind of recognize how do people really feel about things, and, they don't take themselves too seriously. And I think comedy, as silly as it is, and it's, often just leisure and recreation, I actually think it's really important for a society because it sort of rebalances the power dynamics, because powerful people or institutions, you can just be a person with a microphone and you can make fun of them and you can show people not to take things too seriously. You don't need a lot to do that.
I've also heard Denmark described before as like a campfire country, meaning that it's like, yeah, like we all sit around this campfire every night, so we all know each other's humor, and when somebody comes from outside and sits at our campfire, we might like throw a jab at them to try to like test if they'll fit in around the campfire.
Like maybe that's not a lot about humor, but also like the Danish, we are very closed. We're very hard to socialize with. But when you do socialize and you do open up, then it's like then everything goes. Other cultures or other social cultures, you would maybe be very openly more friendly or more openly friendly or smiling even to start out with, but you would have some boundaries in other places of your soul.
If the Danes are making fun of you, it actually means they like you. It feels counterintuitive, but truthfully, it's a way of showing that you're part of the in crowd. Whether you're a new friend, a mate, a coworker, it doesn't matter. If they're starting to make fun of you, it's a way of showing they're comfortable around you and they want you to be part of the group as well.
If you want to say something sarcastic, just be sure that you know the person well enough, because in maybe the friendly, sarcastic banter between colleagues is very normal in Denmark. It might be a culture shock for a colleague of yours you don't know as well. You've never been to that person's place. You barely know that person's middle name. Maybe that's a rule of thumb. If you know the person's middle name, then you can do some sarcastic jokes.
I have a bit of a sharp tongue, and I think I can be a little bit quick-witted, so I like to make those jokes at other people's expenses. And sometimes as a way to socialize, because rather than have a full-on argument or confrontation, I find it easier to kind of diffuse something with a joke and kind of get my point across that way. And I think Danes do that a lot.
As you will see, when they become alcoholics in the evenings and everything becomes ridiculous jokes and they talk in very bantery ways with each other, and it gets very intense sometimes.
If somebody says something that you find inappropriate, call them out on it, because they would also like to understand you.
There's not a lot of things that are taboo in Danish humor. Kind of the idea is of that dark humor is you can go a lot of places, but everybody respects boundaries as long as they know what they are.
It is okay to know that you can tell people if it's too much, but also sometimes don't interpret things in the worst manner.
The amount of rude people, there's a similar amount in any country of rude people.
That sometimes it is someone who's trying to make a joke, even though it might not be fun. But I think as long as you know your limits and you tell them, I think that's the way to navigate it.
And there's trust in knowing that I can say something to you and I trust that you're going to take it the right way, and you can trust that my intention was good in saying that. But I think the key, and this doesn't always happen, which can be a culture clash, is that the person giving that joke or critique needs to make it really clear. If you expect that trust of the good intention being understood, you need to make it completely understood that you meant that as a joke.
I think most human beings are pretty similar, but then we have this 10% overcoat of culture and references and stuff. that you kind of need to like you know, have in mind, and underneath that, it's people are the same.
And we've talked about how language plays into some of this, and also that there's a lot of funny things in the language, especially joking about how you're maybe not too good at it yet if you're a foreigner living in Denmark. You can find a lot more discussion about this and reasons why learning Danish is not just hard, but also hilarious with a video that Conrad and I made right here. You can watch that and learn more about how hard but hilarious it is learning Danish. Thanks for watching today, everybody. Hi.
Hi.